I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, assuming you're not driving or operating heavy machinery right now.
Yeah, please keep your eyes open if you're on the freeway.
Right, exactly. But if you're somewhere safe, just imagine your absolute greatest enemy in life.
Oh, that's a heavy way to start.
I know. But think about the one specific thing that truly holds you back from whatever it is you define as success or peace.
And when we do this exercise, almost all of us instinctively default to external factors, right?
Yes, exactly. We think the enemy is, I don't know, a lack of capital, a lack of innate talent, a toxic boss.
Or maybe just a persistent streak of bad luck.
Right. We conceptualize our obstacles as these physical, tangible barricades placed in our way by the universe.
Like the world is just actively conspiring against us.
Yeah. But what if the actual enemy, the true villain in the narrative of your life, isn't any of those external things at all?
I love where you're going with this.
What if your greatest enemy is simply confusion? It's that heavy, suffocating, undefined mental fog. The fog that keeps you spinning in circles, you know?
Yeah, drowning in a relentless loop of your own thoughts.
Exactly. Operating at maximum capacity, but never actually moving forward.
It's a profound and, frankly, a really uncomfortable shift in perspective.
It really is.
Because we spend so much of our finite energy fighting these phantom external battles.
While completely ignoring the fact that the battlefield itself is entirely obscured.
Right, we are just swinging swords in the dark.
Swinging swords in the dark. I love that. And that is exactly what we are unpacking in today's deep dive.
We are looking at a psychological concept that is deceptively simple on the surface.
But it's deeply rooted in how our neurology processes stress and adversity.
It's known as Kidlin's law.
Kidlin's law. Right. And the core premise is this. The simple, mechanical act of writing a problem down clearly can fundamentally shift you out of a state of emotional paralysis.
And push you directly into a state of logical action.
Now, I really want to dig into the mechanics of this today. We're pulling together insights from two really fascinating sources for this deep dive.
Yeah, we've got the Dark Psychology Vault and also Life Basics.
Right, and these sources really bridge the gap between deep, somewhat uncomfortable psychological realities and highly practical, boots-on-the-ground methodologies.
Because we aren't just going to look at the theory of why we sabotage ourselves.
No, we are going to look at the exact cognitive tools used to map complex obstacles and break them down into actionable sequences.
So the mission for this deep dive is to basically hand you a framework.
But to understand how the framework operates, we first have to dissect the problem.
Right. Before we can talk about destroying the mental fog, we need to understand the anatomy of the fog itself.
Exactly. Like, why is it so paralyzing in the first place?
Well, to understand the paralysis, we really have to look at how humans process compounding stress.
Compounding stress. Okay, unpack that for me.
So life, in all its brutality, rarely destroys a person in one dramatic, cinematic blow.
Right, it's not usually a movie scene.
Exactly. We are conditioned by movies and literature to expect the singular catastrophe, right? The sudden bankruptcy, the explosive ruin.
The huge dramatic plot twist.
Yeah. But reality is much quieter and much more insidious. It wears us down through a compounding accumulation of small, undefined, unarticulated stresses.
Oh man, that hits close to home.
Right? It is the stack of mail sitting on the kitchen counter that you just absolutely refuse to open.
Yes. Or the overflowing email inbox that you just casually ignore over the weekend.
Exactly. Or it's the strained relationship where every conversation feels slightly off-center.
But you never actually name the tension.
Right. It's that vague sense of dread you wake up with.
Like the health habits you mentally promised yourself you'd start on Monday, but now it's Thursday afternoon and you haven't done anything.
And you just feel this low-grade hum of guilt constantly in the background.
Individually, isolated in a vacuum, none of these things are fatal.
Yeah.
I mean, an unopened piece of mail is not going to kill you.
A missed workout will not end your life.
Right. But when you allow them to remain undefined, they don't just sit there, they aggregate.
They create this invisible, swirling storm of cognitive load.
And you find yourself standing right in the epicenter of that storm, completely frozen.
And the reason you freeze is that the psychological weight of confusion is actually significantly heavier than the weight of any individual problem.
Wait, really? The confusion itself is heavier.
Absolutely. When these obstacles remain entirely locked inside our heads, just sort of floating around in our working memory, we fail to define the parameters of the battlefield.
Okay, I see.
If you look at the history of human conflict, No great military commander ever won a campaign by standing on a hill, looking at a foggy valley and saying, well, we're fighting something down there, somewhere, somehow.
Right, that would be a terrible strategy.
They win because they map the terrain, they establish coordinates, they mark the enemy's exact position.
They force the chaos to take a definitive geometric shape.
Exactly. But in our daily lives, particularly in the modern knowledge economy, we rarely define our battlefield.
We really don't. We just wake up, stumble into the day, take the hits as they come.
And then we label that reactive state as survival.
Yes. And we tell ourselves this very comforting lie. We say, I am just incredibly busy right now, but I'll figure it out tomorrow.
But inevitably, tomorrow looks exactly like yesterday.
Because the structure of the day hasn't changed, only the date on the calendar.
Right. Let's ground this in a highly realistic modern example. Let's look at a professional scenario.
Okay, lay it on me.
Imagine a mid-level manager. We'll call her Sarah. Sarah is drowning.
Oh yeah, I feel for Sarah already.
From the moment she logs on at 8 a.m., she is getting hammered by Slack messages. She is pulled into back-to-back Zoom meetings with zero agendas.
Oh, the no agenda meetings are the worst.
The absolute worst. And her inbox is perpetually at unread zero. I mean, she feels intensely, overwhelmingly busy.
Right. By 6:00 p.m., she is physically and emotionally exhausted.
But when her quarterly performance review comes around, the feedback is just mediocre.
Ouch. Because the actual needle of her core projects hasn't moved.
Exactly. She is doing a massive amount of work, but nothing of substance is being completed.
And what is Sarah's internal psychological narrative in that moment? She almost certainly internalizes the failure, right?
Oh, 100%. She tells herself that she just isn't working hard enough.
Or that she isn't smart enough.
Or that she needs to start waking up at 5 a.m. to get ahead of the curve.
That is the illusion of the fog right there. She thinks the solution is more raw effort.
But the true problem, the one she has never once stopped to clearly identify, is a structural bottleneck in her workflow.
So perhaps she is acting as a router for decisions that her team should be making autonomously.
Exactly. Or perhaps she has never defined her core priorities for the quarter.
Because she hasn't clearly defined the repeating obstacle, the fog just thickens.
Her raw effort is being poured into a bucket with a massive hole in it.
And eventually that frustration metastasizes into complete burnout.
Or let's pivot to something even more universal. Let's talk about relationships.
Oh boy, okay.
Think about a couple stuck in a negative feedback loop. There's David and his partner.
Okay, David and his partner.
They are in this endless, exhausting cycle. They argue constantly over the exact same things. Who paid for what last week? Who didn't empty the dishwasher?
Why they don't spend quality time together anymore.
Right. They circle each other like exhausted boxers in the 12th round, just throwing the same weak, predictable punches over and over again.
They never actually land a knockout blow, and more importantly, they never find a resolution.
Never. And if you ask David what's wrong, what does he say?
He says, well, we just can't get along anymore. We're growing apart.
Which is a tragic yet incredibly common misdiagnosis of the situation.
Wait, misdiagnosis? How so?
Because saying we can't get along is a symptom. It is an emotional output. It is not the root cause.
Okay, I see what you mean.
The real problem, the undefined enemy in the room, is that neither David nor his partner have ever sat down, separately or together, and written out in plain, unambiguous language exactly what they want.
What their boundaries are and what they need from the relationship to feel valued.
Exactly. They are living entirely in the fog of assumptions and reactive emotions.
And fog is the ultimate destroyer of intimacy.
It truly is. You cannot connect deeply with someone when the terms of the connection are completely obscured by unstated resentments.
It doesn't just destroy marriages either. It literally destroys empires.
Oh, the Napoleon example from the sources.
Yes. There's a fascinating historical parallel here. Look at Napoleon Bonaparte.
By all accounts, one of the most brilliant, ruthless military strategists to ever walk the earth.
Right. So he marches his massive Grand Army into Russia in 1812.
And he is seemingly relying entirely on his own mythos, his sheer willpower, to conquer the Russian landscape.
But he ignored the most glaring yet mundane, undefined problem of the campaign.
The logistics of the supply lines.
Yes. It is a textbook illustration of the fatal cost of the fog.
He marched 500,000 men into the fog of his own hubris.
The obvious, deeply unsexy, mechanical problem of feeding, clothing, and supplying an army of that magnitude across a scorched earth landscape in sub-zero temperatures.
He just left it largely undefined in its grim reality.
He assumed momentum would solve the logistical nightmare.
And his men froze and starved, not because the Russian army outfought them in pitched battle.
Not because the supply lines broke down.
Clarity on paper, a stark mathematical acknowledgement of the distance and the temperature versus the caloric needs of the men could have saved an empire.
But pride and confusion kept him blind.
It is rarely the sheer size of a problem that breaks an individual or a nation.
It is the failure to accurately define the mechanics of the problem.
Exactly.
Okay, let's pause here and unpack this because I want to push back just a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
It's easy for us to sit here in a comfortable studio and say, well, Napoleon should have just done the math. Or Sarah should just optimize her workflow.
Right, it sounds very simple in hindsight.
I understand the metaphor. It feels like fighting a ghost in a dark room. You cannot punch what you cannot see.
Yeah.
But is it really, truly just a lack of clarity? If we look at the modern world, if we look at the objective reality of Sarah's inbox or the economic pressures on David, are people truly just confused?
That's a very fair point to raise.
Because, I mean, are they genuinely, legitimately overwhelmed by the sheer objective volume of tasks, demands, and financial realities placed upon them?
You're asking if we are perhaps underestimating the actual weight of modern existence.
Yeah, exactly. Are we downplaying how hard things actually are?
That is exactly the critical question we have to ask to avoid falling into toxic positivity.
Right, because we don't want to just be like, good vibes only, just write it down and your massive debt goes away.
Exactly. We have to address the reality of the volume. But if we examine this through the lens of cognitive load theory and how the human brain processes information, we realize something fascinating.
Which is what?
That volume itself is often an illusion.
An illusion. How can 1,000 emails be an illusion?
Because volume without structure is what creates the feeling of overwhelm. Let's replace the vague idea of a messy library with a more accurate mechanical analogy.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about a computer's RAM, its working memory.
Right.
If you open 150 heavy browser tabs on your computer simultaneously, the machine will freeze.
Oh yeah, the fan will start screaming, the screen will lock up.
And the computer will become entirely useless. Now, does the computer lack the hard drive space to store the information in those tabs?
No, the hard drive is massive.
Exactly. The problem is that the computer is trying to keep all 150 tabs active in its working memory at the exact same time.
Ah, I see. It's a processing failure, not a storage failure.
Precisely. That makes perfect sense. So human anxiety is essentially having 150 tabs open in our brain's working memory.
And we just freeze.
Yes. The human brain's working memory is incredibly limited. We can only actively juggle about 4 to 7 pieces of information at a time.
Oh wow, only 4 to 7.
That's it. So when you have 50 unarticulated anxieties floating around in your head, the mortgage, the presentation next week, the weird noise your car is making.
The cholesterol test results you're waiting on.
Right. You are maxing out your cognitive RAM. You freeze.
And when we live inside that mental fog, we look at the freezing computer and we normalize the system failure.
We tell ourselves, well, this is just what adulthood feels like.
Or this is just the baseline stress of being a professional. We almost wear that system failure like a badge of honor.
Oh, absolutely. We convince ourselves that being chronically, painfully overwhelmed is the default state of a productive member of society.
Look how stressed I am. I must be very important.
Exactly. And it is a deeply destructive lie.
It really is. It keeps us in a state of perpetual weakness.
It keeps us purely reactive, constantly putting out tiny fires instead of actually designing the architecture of our lives.
Which brings us to the actual mechanism of fixing the system failure, the weapon against the fog.
This is where we officially introduce Kidlin's law.
Yes, the phrasing is so elegant, yet executing it requires a surprising amount of discipline.
So Kidlin's law states, if you write a problem down clearly, the solution becomes easier to find.
Or, in its more common colloquial translation, a problem well stated is a problem half solved.
Write the problem down clearly. I mean, it sounds almost insulting in its simplicity, doesn't it?
It really does. If someone comes to you having an existential crisis and you say, well, have you tried writing it down?
They're likely to roll their eyes at you. Or punch you.
Probably both. But the most profound truths are often the ones we dismiss because they lack complexity.
Exactly. To understand why this isn't just a motivational platitude, we have to look under the hood at the neurological shift that occurs when you physically pick up a pen or place your hands on a keyboard.
Let's do it. What happens in the brain?
Well, the human brain, particularly when subjected to chronic stress, does not operate as a rational, calculating machine.
Right.
It operates more like a funhouse hall of mirrors.
A hall of mirrors. Let's explore that. How exactly does the brain distort reality when we're stressed?
When a threat is perceived, even an abstract modern threat, like a missed deadline your amygdala, the brain's emotional threat detection center lights up.
And it floods your system with stress hormones.
Right. In this state, a single normal-sized problem is reflected, distorted, and multiplied.
So a simple thought like, I missed the deadline on this report, bounces off the mirrors in your working memory.
And it rapidly mutates. It turns into, my boss is going to be furious.
I'm going to get a terrible performance review.
I'm going to be first on the list for layoffs.
I will be able to pay my mortgage. I'm going to lose my house.
Yes. Within milliseconds, a missed deadline has escalated into homelessness.
That is the cognitive distortion of the fog.
And the problem is, while it's bouncing around in your head, all of those distorted reflections feel equally true and equally urgent.
They feel entirely real to your nervous system.
But the physical act of writing acts as a circuit breaker for that loop.
A circuit breaker? I like that.
It is a profound neurological intervention. When you are forced to write something down, you are engaging the motor cognitive link.
Meaning you have to translate abstract, swirling terror into grammatical syntax.
Exactly. You have to choose a subject, a verb, and an object.
You have to hold a pen, which requires fine motor control, and map words onto a two-dimensional space.
And this complex mechanical process cannot be handled by the frantic amygdala.
It forces the brain to route the information to the prefrontal cortex, right?
Yes, which is the logical, analytical, executive functioning center of the brain.
So it's essentially a biological speed limit.
A speed limit? Explain that.
Well, the speed of anxious, looping thought is lightning fast, thousands of words a minute.
Right.
But the physical speed of handwriting is what, maybe 40 words a minute?
If you're fast, yeah.
So you are physically forcing your brain to downshift its gears to match the speed of your hand.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it.
You are moving from merely feeling the terror of the problem to actively observing the structure of the problem.
It acts as a governor on the engine of your anxiety.
Yeah.
And this mechanism is actually the foundational bedrock of cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT.
Oh, I didn't realize that connection.
Yeah, when Aaron Beck developed cognitive therapy, a core component was cognitive restructuring.
So therapists don't just sit there and ask you to vaguely ponder your anxieties. They assign homework.
They ask you to meticulously record your automatic negative thoughts on paper.
Why? Because writing demands precision.
And precision is the natural predator of anxiety.
Precision is the natural predator of anxiety. That's a quote to write down right there.
It really is. Anxiety thrives in the murky, vague, undefined what-ifs.
Writing pins the anxiety to the page like a biological specimen.
You immediately transition from being a helpless victim, submerged in the chaotic ocean of your thoughts, to an objective witness analyzing a specific data point.
And what's fascinating is how the problem itself physically transforms when it hits the paper.
Let's bring back a manager example. We'll call him Alex this time.
Okay, Alex is overwhelmed.
The narrative looping in his Hall of Mirrors is, everything is falling apart. The whole department is a disaster.
Now, everything is falling apart is not a business problem.
No, it is an emotional death sentence.
How do you even begin to allocate resources to solve the concept of everything?
You can't. You just sit at your desk and hyperventilate.
Right. Everything is falling apart is a panic attack masquerading as an operational assessment.
Exactly. But when Alex is forced by this framework to sit down with a blank piece of paper and write out the empirical facts of this situation, the sentence has to change.
He can't just write everything. He has to look at the metrics.
And the sentence transforms from everything is falling apart into I do not have a centralized system to track project deadlines, which is causing deliverables to slip by an average of 3 days.
Notice the profound difference in the architecture of that second sentence.
The fog has dissipated. The enemy has a distinct shape and coordinates.
The problem is no longer an existential dread about everything.
The problem is one specific, identifiable, missing mechanical system.
And a missing tracking system is something a logical brain, operating from the prefrontal cortex, can easily fix.
The clarity acts like a scalpel, cleanly dissecting the actual mechanical issue out of the surrounding emotional tumor.
There was another fantastic example from the sources that highlights this transition from identity to mechanics.
Oh, the university student, yes.
Think about a university student who is severely struggling.
The student's internal monologue is just a massive, oppressive cloud of shame.
Like, I just can't focus on my studies. I lack discipline. I'm just a bad student. and I'm probably going to fail out of life.
That is an identity level crisis.
Right, it's an attack on who they are as a person.
But when that student is forced to apply Kidlin's law, when they are forced to write down a clinical audit of their daily reality, the facts emerge entirely stripped of the emotional self-flagellation.
The resulting list is usually a brutal, yet incredibly liberating audit of behavior.
It reads like this. I spend an average of 4 hours and 12 minutes on my mobile phone daily, primarily on short-form video.
I do not maintain a designated study timetable.
I consume caffeine until 9:00 p.m. and go to sleep past 1:00 a.m.
I leave my social media push notifications active while attempting to read academic texts.
It's incredible, isn't it?
You take this terrifying, identity-destroying monster hiding under the bed, the fear that I am fundamentally broken and destined for failure.
And the moment you drag it into the harsh fluorescent light of the written page, you realize it's just a sequence of 4 easily modifiable bad habits.
The facts themselves immediately dictate the solution.
Delete the app, establish a block schedule, cut off caffeine at 2:00 p.m., put the phone in another room.
It's the instant shift from a sprawling identity crisis to a boring, highly manageable operational checklist.
And that operational checklist is exactly where agency is reclaimed.
But this brings us to a highly uncomfortable paradox.
It does. It raises a question that we really need to sit with.
If the act of writing is so incredibly simple, literally requiring nothing more than 10 cents worth of paper and ink,
And if the neurological relief it provides is so immediate and well documented,
why do we collectively avoid it?
why is it that the vast majority of adults will go through their entire lives suffering immense chronic stress without ever once sitting down in a quiet room to write out the exact parameters of their true problems?
That is the million-dollar question. If the medicine is free and it works, why do we refuse to swallow it?
And the answer to that is a very bitter pill.
We avoid it because clarity is inherently painful.
Yes. Writing things down strips away all of the comforting excuses we have spent years carefully constructing to protect our egos.
It exposes the raw truth that we have been desperately trying to avoid acknowledging.
Writing forces strict, unyielding honesty.
If you write down the mathematical reality of your credit card debt or the specific toxic behaviors in your marriage, you can no longer pretend you don't know what the problem is.
You can no longer play the role of the confused victim.
You lose plausible deniability with yourself.
You can't hide in the comforting fog anymore. This is what we call the paradox of clarity.
The paradox of clarity, I like that.
Yes, clarity is the only thing that ultimately heals you, but first, it hurts.
It demands an initial down payment of courage.
It reminds me of the process of setting a broken bone.
Oh, that's a visceral analogy.
If you fracture your arm, you know intellectually that the bone needs to be set straight in order to heal properly.
But the moment the doctor grabs your arm to snap that bone back into alignment, the pain is excruciating.
So human nature is to avoid the doctor. We avoid the acute, sharp pain of the reset, preferring the dull, chronic ache of a broken arm.
We think avoidance is providing us with comfort.
We push the problem into a dark, unexamined corner of our minds so we can feel marginally lighter just for today.
Just so we can get through the Tuesday afternoon meeting or enjoy our weekend without having a panic attack.
But the danger of that logic is that avoidance is not a state of stasis.
It is not hitting the pause button on your problems.
Avoidance is a state of rapid, invisible decay. Problems that are ignored in the dark do not shrink, they metastasize.
They mutate and grow roots.
Think about the catastrophic sequence of personal failures that stem from this exact mechanism of avoidance.
It is the person who feels a creeping, persistent tightness in their chest, but refuses to schedule a doctor's appointment because they don't want to face the terrifying reality of their mortality.
They avoid the clarity of a diagnosis until that silence explodes into a massive cardiac event in their living room.
Or look at the slow death of a marriage.
You feel the distance growing, you feel the resentment building over months and years.
But you never sit down at the kitchen table and write out the terrifying, heartbreaking sentence. We are actively drifting apart, and if we do not intervene, this marriage will end.
You avoid the brutal argument tonight to keep the peace.
But the rot spreads under the floorboards, and one random Tuesday, 10 years later, you wake up and realize the love is completely, irreversibly dead.
Or let's talk about the most common one, personal finances.
The sheer terror of logging into a bank account.
Swiping the credit card blindly, actively refusing to look at the compounded interest rates or the actual balance.
Because the fog of ignorance feels safer than the math.
And you maintain that illusion right up until the moment the landlord legally changes the locks on your apartment.
What is truly fascinating and somewhat terrifying is that this exact same psychological flaw, the preference for the fog over the sharp pain of clarity, does not just destroy individual lives.
No, it scales up. It destroys massive, legacy-defining, multi-billion-dollar corporations.
The boardroom is just as susceptible to the fear of clarity as the living room.
Look at the classic business case study, Blockbuster Video.
Oh man, Blockbuster. The narrative is often that they were just ignorant.
That they just didn't see the internet coming. But they weren't blind. They lived in the fog by choice.
They could see the technology shifting. John Antioco, the CEO, literally met with Reed Hastings of Netflix in the year 2000.
But the Blockbuster executives vehemently refused to articulate the existential threat on paper.
They coddled their egos with the comforting illusion that their brick-and-mortar late fees were an unshakable revenue model.
Meanwhile, Netflix executed Kidlin's law flawlessly.
They defined the real underlying problem: the friction of physical media distribution.
They mapped it, they solved it, and they utterly annihilated Blockbuster.
And an even more visceral example from the corporate world is Kodak.
This one always blows my mind.
Kodak didn't just get beaten by digital cameras, they literally invented the technology.
An engineer named Steven Sasson invented the first digital camera at Kodak in 1975.
1975. They had the future in their hands.
But their entire global empire, their entire identity as a company, was fundamentally built on the recurring revenue of chemical film processing.
To survive the digital revolution, the executive board would have needed to walk into a room, stand at a whiteboard, and write down one specific, terrifying, empire-shattering sentence.
If chemical film dies, our current business model dies with it.
And they absolutely refused to write that sentence.
They refused the clarity because the clarity demanded that they willingly blow up their own highly profitable legacy.
It was an ego defense mechanism at a corporate scale.
They hid the technology. They told Sasson to keep quiet.
They chose the comfortable fog of the present over the painful reality of the future.
And that act of avoidance resulted in the total, absolute bankruptcy and destruction of one of the most iconic brands of the 20th century.
You can even see this play out on a geopolitical, historical level.
Look at King Louis VI of France right before the revolution.
The nation is drowning in insurmountable debt from foreign wars.
The peasantry is being crushed by taxation. There are literal bread riots occurring in the streets of Paris.
The structural failure of the state was glaringly visible to anyone who possessed eyes.
But the king actively avoided the clarity of the crisis. He retreated into the Palace of Versailles.
He surrounded himself with the fog of endless court ceremony, absolute luxury, and the comforting illusion of his own divine right to rule.
He flatly refused to name the financial and social crisis on paper.
And the ultimate cost of his avoidance wasn't just the loss of his throne. He literally lost his head to the guillotine.
Or consider the fall of the Roman Empire. It wasn't just sacked overnight by barbarians.
No, it rotted from within for decades, perhaps centuries.
Generations of leaders refusing to clearly name the political corruption, the economic inflation, and the moral decay.
They repeatedly chose the political comfort of the status quo over the severe confrontation of reform.
Until the entire empire collapsed inward under its own unacknowledged weight.
So, hearing all of this, what does this actually mean for you, the person listening to this right now?
Let me ask you a direct question. What is your personal digital camera?
What is the obvious looming threat in your career, your finances, or your relationship right now that you are actively, intentionally refusing to write down on a whiteboard?
Why is human nature wired to consistently choose the slow, suffocating, degrading death of avoidance over the quick, sharp, resetting pain of reality?
We do it because we fundamentally misunderstand the nature of reality versus illusion.
We are biologically wired to seek immediate comfort, and we falsely believe that the illusion of the fog protects us from pain.
But the absolute truth of human psychology is that reality is always invariably kinder than illusion.
Always. Illusion is cruel. Illusion drags you through the mud for decades.
It drains your daily energy, it erodes your dignity, and it siphons your joy, drop by drop, for years on end.
Reality, on the other hand, operates differently. Reality punches you square in the jaw once.
It knocks you flat on the floor. It takes your breath away.
And this is the crucial part, after that initial shock wears off, reality gives you a solid concrete floor to stand on.
It gives you friction. And once you have friction, you can begin to walk forward.
I love the metaphor of the structural damage versus cosmetic damage you mentioned earlier.
Oh yeah, avoidance is exactly like having a severe termite infestation in the wooden foundation of your house.
You can put up beautiful new wallpaper, you can buy expensive mid-century modern furniture, you can light scented candles.
And you can tell yourself the house is in perfect condition because you don't actively see the insects in the living room.
But just because you refuse to take a flashlight and crawl under the house to look at the foundation doesn't mean the wood isn't being methodically eaten away.
One day, the structural integrity will fail, and the walls will simply come down.
Exactly. Actively avoiding the problem does not pause the jaws of the termites. It just guarantees the catastrophic collapse.
Which is precisely why the highest performers in human history, the individuals who built empires, advanced science, and successfully navigated unimaginable world-ending crises, did not rely on keeping their problems locked inside their own heads.
They did not trust their working memory. They weaponized the pen.
They understood on a deeply intuitive level that you cannot trust your own emotional state when you are under severe pressure.
You have to trust the external architecture of the paper.
This brings us to a really fascinating section of the source material, the elite playbook.
How history's absolute titans utilized this exact cognitive framework, Kidlin's law, centuries before modern psychology even gave it a name.
Let's start with Marcus Aurelius.
Think about the sheer scale of the cognitive load this man was carrying.
He was the emperor of the Roman Empire, arguably the most powerful single human being on the planet during his reign.
He wasn't sitting in a comfortable office. He was often on the brutal front lines of the Marcomannic Wars in freezing Germania.
He was simultaneously dealing with the Antonine Plague, which was decimating his population,
And navigating severe political betrayals from his closest generals, like Avidius Cassius.
he was carrying the literal life or death weight of millions of human beings. How does a human brain not simply shatter under that pressure?
What does he do? He sits alone in his military tent by the light of an oil lamp every single night, and he writes in a journal.
And it is vital to understand the context of those writings.
The collection we now know as the Meditations was never intended for public consumption.
He wasn't writing philosophical treatises to impress future generations.
He was writing in Greek, not his native Latin, as a form of intense personal cognitive behavioral therapy.
Those journals were his survival mechanism. He was using the pen to give geometric shape to the chaos of the empire.
He was actively externalizing his own internal terror and grief.
By writing down the betrayals, the fear of death, and the sheer unpredictability of life, he stripped those concepts of their emotional dominance and forced his prefrontal cortex to examine them logically.
If he had attempted to keep all of that overwhelming anxiety locked inside his skull, swirling in the fog, he almost certainly would have lost his mind.
And history would have a very different, far darker narrative of his reign.
And we see this exact same necessity for externalization in the minds of unparalleled genius. Look at Thomas Edison or Leonardo da Vinci.
These are intellects that define eras, but they didn't just sit in a chair staring at the ceiling waiting for magical eureka moments to strike them from the heavens.
No, they were compulsive, relentless documenters. They left behind tens of thousands of pages of notebooks.
They didn't just write down their successes. They specifically documented their questions, their failed experiments, and their unsolved problems.
They took abstract, foggy, intellectual wonder and forced it into concrete, systematic investigation on the page.
Consider the burden carried by Winston Churchill during the Blitz of 1940.
The city of London is literally burning every night under the relentless bombardment of the German Luftwaffe.
The existential threat to the survival of the British nation and the free world is absolute.
The psychological fog of despair and imminent defeat was thick enough to choke on.
Churchill didn't just stand up to the microphone and speak off the cuff, hoping for the best.
He spent agonizing, sleepless nights drafting his speeches. He worked line by line, word by word, crossing things out, rewriting, refining the cadence.
He was using the physical act of writing to literally construct the spine of British resilience.
He mapped the overwhelming obstacle of national terror, and through the precision of his vocabulary, he wrote the sequence of courage.
Jump forward to modern titans of industry and leadership. Warren Buffett, historically one of the greatest capital allocators of all time, operates by a very strict, unforgiving rule.
If you cannot write it down, you do not understand it.
If a founder comes to him with a pitch, and they cannot distill their complex business model and investment thesis into a clear, brutally logical written argument, Buffett will not invest a single dime.
The inability to write it clearly is proof of the fog.
And look at Steve Jobs. He was legendary for his ruthless, almost aggressive use of whiteboards.
When he returned to Apple in the late 90s, the company was drowning in a fog of mediocre product lines.
He would use whiteboards as literal battle maps.
He forced his executive team to write down dozens of product ideas, everything they could theoretically build.
And then, standing in front of the board, he would forcefully cross them out one by one, slashing the sprawling chaos down to a deeply focused grid of just 4 core products.
The physical act of writing it all down was the prerequisite that made the ruthless cutting possible.
We also see this mechanism used to process profound emotional trauma.
Oprah Winfrey has spoken extensively and openly about how she utilized rigorous daily journaling to process the intense, staggering hardships and abuse of her early life.
She didn't just passively write down her dreams, she specifically and bravely named her pain.
She externalized the trauma onto the page.
And in doing so, she robbed it of its power to silently consume her from the inside, slowly turning that processed pain into the psychological fuel that drove her empire.
Or Dwight D. Eisenhower, the man tasked with managing the entire logistical nightmare of the Allied military campaign in Europe during World War II.
The sheer volume of decisions that crossed his desk daily would crush a normal mind.
To survive, he invented a literal paper matrix, what we now call the Eisenhower box, or the urgent important matrix.
He drew physical quadrants on a piece of paper to force his decision-making process out of the reactive, panic-driven realm of the amygdala and into the cold, strategic realm of priority.
It is all the exact same underlying psychological principle. None of these titans trusted the fog.
The common unbreakable thread connecting all of these historical figures is incredible cognitive discipline.
For these leaders, writing was never just about passively recording data like a stenographer.
No, it was an active, aggressive practice of cognitive organization. I love the way this concept is framed in the source material.
Writing is not note-taking. It is the practice of forging a blade.
Think about the physical act of what we're discussing. The first stroke of the pen names the problem. You drag the monster out from under the bed and force it into the light.
The second stroke cuts the problem into manageable, localized pieces.
The third stroke carves out the action plan.
It is a deeply active, almost militant process against your own complacency.
So the ultimate question for us and for everyone listening is this: how do we actually do this?
How do we emulate Marcus Aurelius or Steve Jobs on a Tuesday morning?
How do we take Kidlin's law and apply it to the messy, complicated, thoroughly modern realities of our own lives?
That is the crucial pivot point of this entire discussion. We must transition from the theory of sudden clarity to the mechanics of actual transformation.
Because there is a very dangerous psychological trap here.
You can write your problem down, experience that massive sudden rush of dopamine and relief, that heavy sigh of, so that's what's wrong with my life, and then you simply stop.
You close the notebook and go watch television.
But relief is not transformation. Relief is just taking a heavy backpack off your shoulders for 5 minutes before putting it back on.
True transformation requires taking that newly defined, naked problem and aggressively breaking it down into actionable, sequential first steps.
This is where we get incredibly practical. If you have a pen, now is the time to use it.
We're going to walk through a synthesized 5-step framework to map out these complex obstacles.
We'll go step by step, because this is the actual toolkit you need to dismantle the fog.
Let's begin with step 1. Write it in 1 sentence.
And the rule here is absolute. You get 1 sentence.
No sprawling narratives, no paragraphs of self-pity, no long meandering justifications about how unfair the economy is or how your parents didn't set you up for success.
You have to pin the core problem to the page like a biological specimen under a microscope.
This step is significantly harder than it sounds, primarily because human beings are deeply addicted to their own narratives.
Our stories validate our suffering. They make us feel like our lack of progress is justified.
But the story's the fog. If your overarching problem is a lack of financial stability, you do not write, "I'm just naturally terrible with money, my parents never taught me financial literacy, and inflation is rigged against the middle class."
That is a story designed to protect your ego. It is entirely useless for solving the problem.
You must write the brutal math. I currently have $14,000 in credit card debt across 3 accounts.
One single, undeniable sentence.
Exactly. The brevity forces the honesty, which leads seamlessly into step 2. Focus on facts, not emotions.
You have to act as your own editor and actively strip all the adjectives and dramatic flair out of the sentence.
You're intentionally shifting your role from the tragic victim of a grand narrative to the cold, objective auditor of the facts.
Which prepares the ground for step 3, ask why 5 times.
This is where the heavy analytical lifting occurs.
This is actually a root cause analysis technique originally pioneered by Sakichi Toyota for the Toyota Motor Corporation to solve manufacturing errors, but it applies perfectly to human psychology.
You have to relentlessly drill down past the surface level symptom.
Okay, let's actually roleplay this because I think people underestimate the friction involved in doing this, honestly.
I'll be the guinea pig. Let's take a realistic, messy problem.
All right, what's your step 1 sentence?
Let's say my step 1 sentence is, I cannot seem to launch this new creative project I've been talking about for a year. I just keep procrastinating.
All right, that's a common fog. Let's apply the framework. Why are you procrastinating?
Because I just don't have enough time in the week. I'm too busy.
Time is almost always a protective excuse, not root cause. Time is a matter of priority, not volume. Let's dig deeper. Why do you feel you don't have enough time to prioritize this project?
Well, because my days are completely consumed by managing minor, tedious administrative tasks for my main business.
Yeah.
Getting warmer. Why are you personally managing minor administrative tasks instead of delegating them?
Because, honestly, I don't trust my junior team members to execute them correctly without making mistakes that I'll have to fix anyway.
Now we're hitting the nerve. Why don't you trust your team to execute basic administrative tasks?
Because we never actually sat down and built a proper documented training protocol when we hired them. I just threw them into the deep end.
Bingo! Look at the massive shift that just occurred.
The initial fog I presented was an identity level flaw. I'm a procrastinator.
But the actual defined battlefield at the root of the issue is, I need to spend 3 days building a standardized training protocol for my junior staff.
Do you see how the first is an unsolvable character defect and the second is a highly solvable operational task?
That is genuinely profound when you experience the friction of it.
You forced me to isolate the actual tumor instead of just complaining about the fever.
So once we have that root cause,
Right.
we move to step 4, write possible solutions. This is where you take that newly defined, hyper-specific problem and slice it into bite-sized pieces.
Let's go back to the financial example we used earlier.
The step 1 sentence was, I have $13,320 in credit card debt at a 22% interest rate.
When that number is just floating in your working memory, it's a terrifying monster screaming at you in the dark.
But on a piece of paper, you can slice that monster into 5 distinct, unemotional actions.
Action 1, call the bank tomorrow at noon and ask for a rate reduction.
Action 2, audit my bank statements and cancel every single unused digital subscription.
Action 3, identify a weekend side hustle that can generate an extra $200 a week.
Action 4, build a visual debt repayment calendar and stick it on the fridge.
Action 5, commit to 0 restaurant dining for the next 90 days.
Look at what you've accomplished in 10 minutes of writing.
You have taken an existential, crushing financial dread that was ruining your sleep, and you have systematically converted it into a highly manageable Tuesday afternoon to-do list.
The mountain hasn't disappeared, but it has drastically shrunk in its psychological dominance.
And that brings us to the ultimate catalyst, step 5. Take the smallest, immediate step.
This is the secret to breaking paralysis.
You do not have to solve the entire $14,000 debt today.
In fact, trying to do so will just cause a new form of overwhelm.
You just have to do the absolute easiest, lowest friction thing on that list to build immediate psychological momentum.
Go into your app and cancel one $10 streaming subscription right now.
In that singular moment, you have shifted your identity from a paralyzed victim to an active participant in your own rescue.
I am completely on board with this framework for mechanical problems. It makes perfect sense for money, for business metrics, for workflow scheduling.
But you're wondering about the rest.
I have to ask the hard question. What about the dark, murky, deeply human stuff?
How do you apply a rigid, logical 5-step framework to a soul-crushing, abstract, emotional issue?
Yeah. What if a listener's problem right now is, I feel completely, hollowly empty inside, or I despise the career I've spent the last 12 years building, but I feel trapped?
You can't just spreadsheet your way out of a profound existential crisis, can you?
It's a vital distinction to make. Those are the problems that demand the absolute highest level of courage to even attempt to articulate.
The fog surrounding an existential crisis is the thickest fog of all.
But the underlying mechanics of the framework still apply. It simply requires a much more brutal type of honesty.
The physical practice remains identical. You still sit down, you still write it down.
You still force the emptiness to take a geometric shape on the page.
And then you ask, what is the smallest micro action I can take today that honors and respects this truth?
There was a profound example of this exact scenario in the research we reviewed. It involved a professional named Ravi.
Ravi is in a state of deep, dark despair. He feels entirely invisible at his corporate job.
He's receiving no recognition, he's been passed over for promotions, and the spark of ambition is completely extinguished.
In his head, the distorted funhouse mirror version of his reality is a sprawling tragedy. My career is permanently doomed. I am a fundamental failure.
I have wasted the best decade of my life in a dead-end job, and there is no way out.
That is a massive, crushing, suffocating weight to wake up with every day.
But imagine Ravi decides to apply Kidlin's law. He sits down, fights through the resistance, and forces himself to write down the factual reality of his employment, aggressively stripping away the emotional catastrophe.
Through the exercise of the 5 whys, the sprawling tragedy condenses into a single, highly specific sentence. I have not shown my direct manager any concrete, quantified results of my daily labor in over 6 months.
The shift in perspective there is staggering. He goes from my entire life is a waste to I have a specific communication and visibility gap with my current manager.
And the beauty of Kidlin's law is that once the sentence becomes that specific, the solutions literally write themselves.
Ravi creates a very simple operational plan. He will track his individual achievements every Wednesday afternoon.
He will send a short, bulleted summary email of his completed tasks every Friday morning at 9 a.m.
And he will request a standing 15-minute one-on-one check-in with his boss on the first Tuesday of every month.
And according to the case study, 6 months of executing that simple, mundane protocol leads directly to the visibility required to secure a major promotion.
But what is truly vital to recognize here is the underlying mechanism of the psychological change.
The existential crisis did not magically disappear because he wrote a sentence.
But the sprawling, unmanageable terror of a wasted life shrank down into the highly manageable task of scheduling a 15-minute weekly calendar block.
The action itself cured the anxiety.
I have to admit, when I first read that example, I was skeptical.
You thought it sounded too easy.
I thought, you're telling me a decade of profound professional emptiness and burnout was cured by sending a Friday status email?
It borders on sounding insulting to anyone who has experienced real clinical burnout.
But as we talk through the mechanics, I realize it's not the email that cures the burnout, it's the restoration of agency.
The email is just a proof of life. It's proof that you still have control over your environment.
That is exactly the distinction. It is about agency. Helplessness is a learned behavior.
When you are in the fog, you learn to be helpless.
It feels simple, but it is excruciatingly difficult to execute in the moment.
And that's where most people get tripped up and abandon the process.
People believe they need to feel strong, or feel deeply motivated, or feel a surge of bravery before they can sit down and face their terrifying problems on paper.
They sit around waiting for a magical wave of confidence to wash over them, assuming that action follows emotion.
But that is biologically backwards. Strength does not precede the act of writing.
Strength is forged by the act of writing.
You do not wait until you are strong to write. You write, and the act of writing forces you to become strong.
The physical action creates the emotional state, not the other way around.
Picking up the pen when you are terrified is the ultimate act of rebellion against your own learned helplessness.
You write, and the act of writing forces you to become strong. That is a paradigm shift.
That is the exact moment you transition from being a passive passenger in the vehicle of your life to grabbing the steering wheel.
As we begin to wrap up this incredibly dense deep dive, I want to circle back to the core visual metaphor that ties all of this together.
I want you to imagine right now that you are lost in a dark, seemingly endless forest.
You have been walking in exhausted circles for years, recognizing the same trees, fighting the same arguments, stressing over the same depleted bank account.
The true problem, your greatest enemy, is not the forest itself. It is the thick, suffocating fog that obscures the path and keeps you spinning in loops.
But you are not defenseless. You have tools at your disposal right now.
The pen is your torch. It does not magically teleport you out of the forest, but it instantly burns away the fog and reveals the next 3 feet of the path directly in front of you.
And your action plan, that rigorous, honest 5-step breakdown that is your blade.
You use it to systematically hack through the underbrush, one single low-friction step at a time.
It is a perfect, enduring synthesis of the individual journey toward clarity.
But before we officially sign off, I wanted to leave the listener with a slightly provocative thought to chew on over the next few days.
Throughout this entire hour, we have focused exclusively on the psychology of the individual.
We've talked about Sarah's inbox, David's relationship, your personal credit card debt, your individual existential dread.
But what happens when we scale Kidlin's law up? What happens when this neurological mechanism is applied collectively?
Now that is a fascinating direction to take this.
Think about the systemic fog we all navigate daily. What if an entire fractured family, or a deeply toxic corporate department, or even a violently divided local community agreed to sit down in a room together?
And instead of yelling at each other, instead of pointing fingers, instead of relying on their deeply entrenched emotional narratives and historical grievances,
They were forced by a facilitator to define their shared problem in exactly one written sentence on a whiteboard.
no blame allowed, just the empirical facts of the shared friction.
Could the collective, shared act of externalizing the turmoil, the act of achieving a unified grammatical clarity, be the actual cure for systemic organizational dysfunction?
If writing a problem down cuts the individual fog and restores personal agency, what could it do for the collective fog that is currently paralyzing our institutions?
That is a massive, incredibly timely question. It's honestly a direct challenge to every manager, every parent, and every community leader listening right now.
If you lead people, you owe it to them to define the battlefield.
But let's bring it back home to the most important person in this conversation. You, the listener.
We are ending this deep dive with a very direct, very personal challenge.
Tonight, before you go to sleep, do not let this hour be just another piece of audio content that you passively consumed to make yourself feel productive while commuting or doing the dishes.
Do not let this fade into the fog. Take one physical piece of paper and a pen.
Find a quiet room where you will not be interrupted. And find the one sentence you are most terrified to write down.
You already know what it is. It's the truth you've been actively avoiding for months, maybe years.
Write it down in ink. Stare at it. Let it hurt. Let the clarity break the moan so it can heal.
And then ask yourself, using the prefrontal cortex you just engaged, what is my absolute first, smallest step?
Light the torch. Let tonight be the turning point.
The fog is heavy, and it will drown you if you let it. But the pen is light. The choice of which to carry is entirely yours.
Until next time, keep digging deep.